Hello, YouTubers. Joe Curza here on Friday, November 29th, 2013, around 3:15 in the afternoon Eastern Time. Now, I've been having a very benign day, but I just got off the horn with, how shall we say, a certain individual. Let's leave personalities aside. I've got to blow crud off my glasses. Well, obviously, it was my ex-wife. And it started out very well. I mean, we were having a very reasonable discussion. We had talked for almost an hour. And my word, an hour and a half. And despite the vagaries of the internet and, so forth, I had my headphones on. Well, so the thing is, you never know when you're going to trespass into the area of sensitive material. Who knows wherein lurks the demon that will attack you from someone else's past. I've certainly encountered and run upon a number of those in my line of work and life. Guess I hit some of those today. Let's get to the meat of the issue right away. I had talked to you about the polio vaccine development versus the measles vaccine issue in a past video, and that given that the measles disease wasn't nearly, didn't generate nearly as many poster children for we have to develop the vaccine, against measles, it wasn't nearly as visually compelling as polio. You got the kids in the iron lungs and on crutches. Despite the fact that the measles functionally crippled or really slowed down a lot of kids in their heads and hearing and their eyesight far more than polio did in terms of crippling people. They decided to go for the polio first in terms of the federal government funding because that's where the public, mobilization interest lay. Now, that was at a time when the federal government felt it was, reasonable to try to enlist the help of the American public in any sort of public health issue, public anything issue that affected the population in general. Anybody that remembers, well, I don't think there's too many of us around that do remember, but any of us that around that do remember, the x-ray vans and the school parking lots where you went in and you got your TB x-ray and your TB test. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff that went on in the 50s and up into the very early 60s. But that's long since passed. There's a shared value system then, and right or wrong, there was not a sense that the government was out there to really mess you up, as there is now. Well, as there is now, that sense. I leave it to my viewers and listeners as to whether they think that's the case or not. I think anybody that knows me knows where I stand on that one. But leaving that aside, so we got into the whole thing about polio vaccination again, and I rehearsed what I just said to you, and of course, that doesn't take. Okay, well, all right. So, but yeah, moving on. That. Uh, so you don't think they should be vaccinated against polio? I said, yeah, no, absolutely. People should be vaccinated against polio. And I said, I think absolutely they should be vaccinated against measles. Absolutely. Well, then, of course, she jumped right ahead to whooping cough. Well, we talked about whooping cough, I think, in an earlier video. And the thing about whooping cough vaccinations is, one, if it works at all, it doesn't work very long. I mean, that's common knowledge. And, unless you're an infant of, upwards of 3 years, I mean, whooping cough in general is not a bad disease. I mean, unless you've got like some intrinsic underlying problem like asthma or something, or very, very reactive airways. I mean, after you're 3 or 4, when your airways get big enough, certainly by 5, when your airways get big enough, it's not a big deal. You might have a little fever. Most people don't. You cough. You have a really, really nasty cough for about 6 to 12 weeks. Yeah, that's a problem. But so you take this vaccine, and it lasts maybe anywhere from 5 to 12 years. Then I told you I had whooping cough about 4 years ago, and I had this very persistent cough for about 12, 13 weeks. It was a pain in the behind, but I didn't. Would I have had this stuff injected into me to try to prevent it? No. See, I had whooping cough when I was a youngster. I mean, by youngster, I mean like a year and a half. And as my mother said, Danny gone near killed me. All right. You don't get lifelong immunity from whooping cough either way. Natural disease or vaccine. And see, my problem with vaccines is, select the vaccine you want. If you want to take a measles vaccine, take a measles vaccine. Rubiola. If you want to take a rubella vaccine, take a rubella vaccine. If you want to take a pertussis, whooping cough vaccine, take that. I mean, but don't lump them all in an MMR. Mumps, measles, rubella. Of course, mumps is mumps. That's the dealer's choice, because that affects guys and women. And again, it's one of these diseases that a lot of people have. They don't even know they've had it. If you're going to get a disease and you don't even know you're going to have it, is it worthwhile vaccinating? Well, of course, on the other hand, here's polio that most people had, and it was like diarrhea. But yet, a certain percentage got the complication from it, which was profound. So, yeah. So then you do want to vaccinate for that. And the thing about smallpox was it killed about 30% of the people that had it. So yeah, you want to vaccinate against smallpox, which has more or less been eradicated officially. But they're still keeping the virus around, guys. Let's see if I can show you. Well, I can't really. I'd have to take my shirt off and show you my smallpox vaccination. I'm sure anybody out there who are my viewers that are much over the age of 50 might be able to show me theirs as well. Actually, if I'm recalling correct, I think my son has one. He can correct me on this, but I think it was left up to an option to me at that point. Should he be vaccinated against? I said, yeah, vaccinated against smallpox. And I remember when I had to go travel, and I took my first trip over to Europe. I had to get my thing that said I had a smallpox vaccine. Get the yellow International Health Certificate, all that, stamp. When you get your doc stamp, you're allowed to travel. That's sort of the documentary fueling up, like they do now, I guess, in the transportation system of America, or whatever that's called. All right. Well, now, so that's the thing about the polio vaccine, and of course, well, I was not allowed to get that point of view through clearly. Let's put it that way. So, anyways, we also actually, that was at the end of the discussion, But before that, there was a very reasonable discussion about she had encountered some article, and I don't know, it was in the Dispatch or the New York Times, or in PBS or some joint like that. It must have been okay because it sounded reasonably okay, and I hope she listened to it because she only listens to things that I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. It's just sad when people lose critical thought. Anyway, so what she ended up describing to me was a news report, quote news, unquote, report that was talking about some guy had written an article that talked about, oh, there are all sorts of diseases in the past that we don't have now. Well, that's true. Anybody goes back and reads 17th, 18th, 19th century medical literature, and I particularly recommend that people get facsimile copies of, and they're widely available, facsimile copies of William Osler's The Practice of Medicine, which was published in 1896. I have my uncle's copy, which he bought when he was going to go to medical school. If you read through this, first of all, you've got the first 2/3 of the book are about infectious diseases. And nowadays, if you go buy a medical textbook, it's only about the first 1/7 or so, or 1/8 that are about infectious diseases. So, that shows you how the focus on diseases changed in the last 120 years. And if you go through and you read these the description of these various infectious diseases, it becomes clear in retrospect that these are all, streptococcal or staphylococcal syndromes from, strains of bacteria that have long since been eradicated by either sulfa or the penicillin type drugs, let alone the newer drugs. Because you just don't see this stuff anymore. See, it's interesting, the outlier here is this disease called scarlet fever. Scarlet fever is a streptococcal, it's type A streptococcal disease. It's like sore, strep throat, type A strep throat, streptococcal type A disease. But there's only 3 strains of the 80-some strains of that type A bacterium that produce the toxin that goes to your skin that makes you get the rash. There's nothing special about having scarlet fever. It's just that you happen to have a streptococcal variant that produces a toxin that gives you a skin rash. But there was this huge bunch of nonsense about, oh, you got scarlet fever. Oh, and they put the quarantine signs up on the house, and they burn all the kids' toys out in the road and all this stuff. No, it's no different than any other kind of streptococcal infection in your pharynx. It's just that you have the skin rash. And you got strep. Listen, streptococcal infections can kill you. And they still do, although not nearly as much today. Because those people get treated for them right away. And, of course, then you have the problem with subsequent rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease and so forth. But there's no big deal about scarlet fever. It's strep. it's streptococcal thing. And you read William Allish, there's all these others, oddball skin syndromes that are expressed, in what in retrospect are obviously streptococcal infection. Well, all right. So I guess I just insert favorite word here for not agreeing to her interpretation of that article. Now, the other thing we actually did get time about, which was very reasonable, was, well, she's got a thing about multiple sclerosis. Well, I mean, multiple sclerosis is a horrible disease. And it can hit anybody, it can hit anybody who's going to get it. That's a tautology, isn't it? At any age. We just had a woman at church. Well, she wasn't at church. She used to go to our church. That got multiple sclerosis when she was in her late 20s. And she died after what amounted to 30 plus years and started out as assisted living and then care of this, care of that in a rest home. And she died. Now her head was completely home. People would go see her head. This woman's head was home. It's just like, but she just couldn't do things. Some days though she could do things. Other days though she couldn't. It's a nasty disease. It's an oddball disease. And so we sort of dealt with that. Well, okay, we dealt with that. But then we got to talk about Parkinson's. Well, of course, she happened to have seen Michael J. Fox on the evening news or something the other day. God bless this guy. This guy's an outlier in the Parkinson's disease situation. I mean, he got it at a very early age. Most people don't. Most people who get Parkinson's get it in their mid-late 50s, early 60s. This fellow happened to get it when he's 35, or develop it. You don't get it. You develop it when you're 35, 36, 37. And of course, there was this thing in the late 60s, early 70s when they developed levodopa, L-dopa, to replace that amino acid that was depleted in the substantia nigra of the brain, which is a specific pathologic change in Parkinson's. But like a lot of disease processes, this has to do with the phenomenology of the ontology of disease. Work through that one. The phenomenology of the ontology of disease. And meaning shift. Basically, I'm just saying meaning shift. Now, it may be the same disease, but what you tend to focus on at any given time, that meaning shifts. Does that mean the disease is different? Does that mean the disease process has changed? Does that mean that, well, it might be. Maybe over time the disease process itself changes. We don't know. Is hypertension merely an epiphenomenon of an underlying disease that we ought to really call hypertension? Or more properly, something that causes hypertension? These are all very interesting questions. Anyway, so, after being told that I wasn't being particularly sensitive enough to people who had Parkinson's disease, I told her the story about this fellow. I won't use his name. I'll call him Jack. That's not his name. He was one of these tall, gray-haired, old-timer guys. And he was a gynecologist. Well, he was an obstetrician gynecologist, but I knew he was basically doing just gynecologic surgery, which at that time meant that all he did was hysterectomies. Now, the thing about doing hysterectomies is it's technically a fairly easy surgery. except for two things. Because you've got to ligate the uterine arteries down there without nailing the ureter. Because the ureter is very adherent to the back of the peritoneum. The uterine arteries they're a hair anterior to where the ureter goes, but they're really close in there. They're a little deeper, so with Parkinson's, you have this kind of rotatory stuff, and you've got these big long needle holders, and you use this like number 1 chromic to ligate these uterine arteries. Well, number 1 Dexa. I mean, big suit. I mean, these are big arteries, and we only got the vein too. I mean, you got it all, tie it up, throw an extra few knots. Anyway, so did I call him Jack? I'll call him Jack. Jack he'd go, he'd sort of start down, he'd sort of, here, how could I? And it's called intention tremor. The thing about intention tremor is that when you actually do decide to do your intention, it stops and you go boom. Then you can nail what you want. And he'd do that. I did a lot of his anesthesia because most people thought he was a lawsuit in waiting, but I thought he's fine. He knows his limitations. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Didn't see him at a talk show, schmoozing up to Oprah about his problem. He just did his job. I like that. He just did his job. Just do your job. Just do your job. Well, I think on that one, that pretty much ends the situation. Now, sounds like Paul is even now emerging from the outdoors into the house. In fact, here, he can say goodbye to you here all here. Let's see. He's got some stuff. Oh my word, he's got food and bua and what do you think, Paul?
What? Busy thing.
Well, perhaps there'll be another upload here, but I was describing some stuff here for the folksies.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have anything.
All righty. Well, on that note, I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTube. All righty.